Let's talk Chapter 11. Chapter 11 deals with strategic cost management, kind of the name of the chapter here. So we'll talk about some things that are a little bit different than what we normally talk about. We'll talk more about the strategy behind cost management and how it can be used to hopefully maybe have a competitive advantage for a firm versus its competitors. We'll talk about value chains. We'll talk about life cycle costing. We'll also spend some time talking about just-in-time purchasing and just-in-time costing. So starting out right away in the chapter, about page 568, 569, just kind of some basic terminology to get into the chapter here. Strategic decision making, basically for any company, this applies. It's basically what strategies do we select? What are the things that we're going to do to try to make us successful and be better than the competition. We'll get into more specifics about what those things are here in a bit. So strategic cost management basically just says, let's use our cost data in our cost accounting information systems and use that to develop strategies that will be sustainable and provide a competitive advantage. I really should say sustainable competitive advantage over the competition, right? So basically the thought process is, if I have superior cost information about my products and my production processes, that in and of itself can be a sustainable competitive advantage against my competition. And I think we saw something like that when you did the Wilkerson case. That was kind of part of that case. Was we're looking at a company that really didn't have great costing information, and you saw how they struggled with that, with their different product lines. And so now we're looking at this from the perspective of, what if they did, just the hypothetical, what if they did have good cost data? How would that have helped them and kept them from kind of getting into some of the issues that they were having? And they really didn't even understand the pricing of their products compared to the competition. So the takeaway could have been that their competition had a good idea of what it truly cost to manufacture these products and were pricing accordingly. Wilkerson had no idea, and they were just changing prices really in response to the market and hoping for the best. And you can see how that really not is a good way to manage your company, of course. So part of this is then strategic positioning, right? And this is the key to creating a competitive advantage. So most companies choose, a strategy of some sort, okay? And you're trying to figure out, in the bottom of page 568 is kind of some of those strategies. I should really say kind of the beginning of those. They're really, the strategies themselves are on page 569. And we'll get into more of those here in a bit, but just want you to be aware those are some potential choices that a company would make when it comes to, here's what we're going to do strategy-wise. Okay, so competitive advantage is, the point of that is to say, let's offer better value for the same or lower cost than our competition, right? So basically, I have got a competitive advantage of my business. Can deliver a product, and we just kind of know with a lot of products you're only going to pay a certain price, right? You've got choices when you go to a store and buy something. You're looking for what you perceive as the best value. If it's the brand, maybe it's not so the brand, but you're just looking for the best price. There's all kinds of things that go into it, but a company that produces a product and it knows that it can be lower cost than its competition can maybe offer that lower price but still have all the same bells and whistles and all those things that the competition's offering, and therefore they have a competitive advantage. Customer value is just simply the difference between what the customer perceives as value versus what they sacrifice to obtain that value. So think of that from your role as a consumer. What are products that you perceive as values, and you buy them regularly? There's certain brands, certain types of things that you go, man, whenever I buy that, I feel like I'm getting a bargain. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but that's generally what a company is trying to achieve with you, is to say, when you buy our product, you're getting it at a very good value. And then the bottom one is just total product, the complete range of tangible and intangible benefits that you receive when you buy a product. We buy things to satisfy certain wants and needs. Sometimes you buy things because you have to, right? There's a certain amount of things. I have to buy garbage bags, right? If I don't, I'm going to have a real big problem in my house. So I have to buy those, but you still want value in what you buy. You want them to be of good quality. But there's other things that you buy that maybe you don't have to, but you buy them because it's fun, it's entertaining, it's something to do, something to try. We just bought a new tablet computer. My wife wanted one. We just bought one, and she's enjoying just trying to figure that out on her own and the different things that she can do with it. So the main three strategies that a company will choose, and generally you usually try to pick one of the three. You can dabble in all parts of the three. The danger with a company doing that is when you try to become all things to all customers, you become nothing to a customer. That's one danger. So generally, companies focus on one of the three, but they might dabble in another one in a little bit. Or what some companies do is they have different divisions or different companies under the same corporate umbrella, and different companies are doing different things within the same space. But the danger of that is you might be pirating sales from one area. You're competing with yourself. So generally, companies tend to focus on one of the three. So the big three, and again, these are on 569, a cost leader, and you're just trying to provide better value at a lower cost. And I would assume everybody probably thought Walmart, right? When you go to Walmart, that's what you expect. They don't advertise a lot. They don't put out weekly ads a lot. But when you walk into Walmart, you generally expect to find the lowest price possible because that's their whole model. That's how they got big, is they just focused on cost, cost, cost. How can we minimize the cost of getting these products to our customers, the cost of running a store, the value chain that they have? It's as low cost as possible. Next is product differentiation, right? Basically, striving to increase customer value by increasing what the customer receives. So basically creating that value with a customer that I'm going to pay more for this because I'm perceiving a better quality, or I'm going to go to that store because I'm perceiving more product offerings of higher quality, whatever that is, or maybe I'm going to get better service. Those are kind of some of the things you can think of. So generally you think of Target, maybe if you think just a big box retailer as a product differentiator. You expect to pay more at Target than Walmart generally. Target's advertising a lot more. They do the weekly ads. But you also probably expect maybe a little bit better terms of quality or product selection than maybe what Walmart offers. And another example I can use is Menards versus Ace Hardware, right? If you walk into Menards, you're probably not going to have an employee come up to you and ask you, can I help you with anything? Can I help you find something? Doesn't mean that if you wanted to get help that you can't get it. You certainly can ask an employee and you probably would get assistance and help. But the prices are low. But their model is if a customer needs help, the customer will ask us. And then we'll do our best to, of course, help out the customer. But you kind of expect to go there finding fairly low prices, a wide variety of products. They're branching out into more than just home improvement. They've got all kinds of things in there now. Versus you walk into an Ace Hardware. Ace Hardwares are smaller, of course, so they're not going to have the product offerings. But you walk into an Ace Hardware, somebody's going to step up to you and say, can I help you? What are you looking for? You can say, I've got this project I'm working on at home. Can somebody here give me some advice? And you probably are going to get that advice. You're going to get some real input and some assistance and some offers on what products to buy. Now you're going to pay more, right? So, but that's part of that differentiation. That's where Ace Hardware is saying, we're never going to compete with the big guys on price, but we can compete on a value proposition in terms of product knowledge and just the ability that when a customer comes in, we're going to approach the customer and say, can I help you find something? So those are just some examples of cost leadership versus differentiation. Then focusing is just a customer saying, or I should really say a company saying, we're going to just focus on one market segment, and that's all we're going to focus on. We know that that's limiting. We're not focusing on everybody, but we're going to zero in on a certain customer base, and that's all we're going to do. There's nothing wrong with that, and if that goes well, you can branch out and focus on other groups also. So you're literally just saying, we believe that this customer base is underserved, or there's a need for something for them, whatever that is, and that's where we're going to go. So a focusing strategy works also. One that comes to mind actually is in the airline industry, and for Sioux Falls with Allegiant Air, that was Allegiant's model, was to serve mid-sized cities and get them people cheaply to vacation destinations across the country. That's their model. So they serve cities around the size of Sioux Falls, and then they fly directly to vacation destinations. So you can leave Sioux Falls, you can go to Orlando, you can go to Tampa, you can go to LA, you can go to Vegas, you can go to Mesa. Those are the main places, right? You're typically going somewhere where it's a popular touristy destination, especially in the winter when people are trying to escape winter, or trying to go south for a while and get away from winter for a while before coming back. So they focused on that. They said, let's look at cities that are mid-sized, to have smaller airports, so the landing fees are not as expensive as they are at the really large airports, and let's get people from point A to point B cheaply. And it's a different model in that you pay for everything, right? If you just want to get yourself there with one carry-on, and you don't care where you sit in the plane, it's going to be fairly cheap. But the second that you want to check a bag, choose your seat, anything you do is an add-on with that airline. So it's kind of crazy how that works. But that was their focus. They said, let's serve these markets that the bigger airlines are not serving, or if they are, they're not doing it very cheaply. You know, people are paying a lot to go to those destinations. So that's an example of a focusing strategy. And so strategic positioning is just a company selecting the mix of the three. You know, what do we want to do? Do we want to try to be all things to all people? Do we want to dabble in some but focus on one? And again, the danger is if you try to be in too many, that you might pirate sales from yourself, potentially. So then once we kind of figured that out, a lot of the chapter starts to begin to deal with value chain framework, linkages, and activities. And that begins on page 570, and they give us an example of the petroleum industry on page 571 that we'll take a look at. So your value chain. And I think everybody should be fairly aware of what your value chain is. Now, it's going to be different depending on the type of business, of course. If you're manufacturing a product, your value chain is going to be a really big deal. If you are selling a service, your value chain is not going to be as complicated, right? My background was primarily financial services. That was the majority of my career in accounting, and value chain in insurance was people and paper and technology. Basically, it was pretty simple. Providing a service is very different than manufacturing a product, where we have to buy raw materials and all those kinds of things and manufacture a product, then sell this physical good. So there's two kinds of linkages within a value chain framework: internal and external. Internal is just those internal relationships, activities performed within your company, right, that allow the manufacturing of your product to be made, or the production of your service. External is basically the relationship with anybody who has who's a part of that value chain. So primarily it's relationships with your customers and your suppliers, right? I need to purchase raw materials, and I need to sell finished goods to my customers. So primarily it's your suppliers and customers. So on page 571 is the value chain for petroleum. And you can see that they've got a couple of examples here. They've got firm A on the left, firm B and C on the right. And you can kind of just see the levels of here where we're doing exploration, distribution. So you have firm A, which is kind of involved in all parts of the value chain. You've got firms B and C, which are just involved in certain parts of the value chain. You're going to find that too, as some companies only do very certain things, and then they move on. Basically, so for firm B and C, firm B just does exploration and distribution, and they're done. They sell their goods to somebody in firm C who is receiving crude oil and then refining it. Okay, and then firm C is selling it to a distribution channel and service stations and so on, whereas firm A is fully integrated on the left there, where they're doing everything. They're exploring, distributing, refining, selling off that gas to maybe their own service stations, for example, that they actually even own. Where the service station, of course, is then selling that good to the end customer. So you can have a firm like firm A, which is involved in all parts of the value chain, or examples like firms B and C, which just are focused on a narrow piece of the value chain. That's all they want to do. So firm B is finding oil and distributing it. Firm C is processing that oil and selling it to gas stations. Okay, so those are just different parts of the value chain. So organizational activities and cost drivers, you have two kinds of activities here, structural and executional. Both are on page 572 towards the top of the page there. So structural, determining the underlying economic structure, and executional, defining processes and capabilities. So structural is what should my company look like in terms of the structure. Executional is what are the processes we need to go through to produce a good or provide a service. So they give us lots of examples. That's probably the best way to understand that, is just to look at examples. So what you see on the screen here is on the bottom of page 572. Structural activities start out with, so building of plants. Structural cost driver is number of plants, scale of the plants, degree of centralization of plants. You can read through those examples on your own, and I think they become fairly obvious once you read them and go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Executional, using employees, and the cost driver is the degree of involvement of our employees and things like that, providing quality, the quality management approach. So they kind of just become self-evident as you read them. So operational activities, again, just the day-to-day activities that you have to go through to provide manufacture your product or deliver a service to your customers. Okay, so operational cost drivers are just the factors that drive the cost of those activities. Okay, so just think of the day-to-day operations of wherever you work. If it's a service company, a manufacturer, whatever it is, just be aware of those operational activities, right? And just think, these are the steps that have to happen. I'm sure we're all aware of processes, and processes involving both delivering of a service or manufacturing of a good. And I've been primarily involved in services, but there's still processes and steps that have to be followed to issue an insurance policy, issue an annuity. And once it's been issued, there's steps that have to be followed to receive payment and properly update somebody's policy for payment. There's steps you have to follow for a claim and all those kinds of things. There's all kinds of activities that are performed to make sure things are happening the way they're supposed to be. And that's really all that this is. So several examples here. They're looking at this from the perspective of activities, right? And so you can see lots of activities in the left columns. On the right hand side, you can see what are some of the drivers that drive the cost of those activities. Okay, so just on this screen right here is on the top of page 574. And it kind of just shows you the relationship. They talked about linkage, how these things are linked to each other. So you have some kind of activity, right? Selecting and using process technologies. Then you've got your cost drivers. We'll spend some time here with GIT in a bit. Your operational activities, moving material, and your driver, the number of moves. You have these happening continuously. Okay. So as we look at a value chain, it's again identifying and exploiting both internal and external linkages to strengthen your strategic position. Right, really the point of we're spending a lot of time crunching numbers in this class, right? I've given you all kinds of things to problems and things like that, where you're solving these things and coming up with numbers, and that's really important. It's also important, though, that knowing that if we have good cost data and we have the ability to crunch those numbers and come up with analysis and position ourselves with information. So basically just think, knowledge is power, information is power. And if I know the true cost of all of my steps in my value chain, I know the true cost of manufacturing my product or delivering my service, and I can continuously work on getting better at that and always find efficiencies and things I can do to continue to add more value to the products I make. That is a competitive advantage. That is the relationship between cost management and strategy that I want everybody to kind of walk away with. So exploiting internal linkages, right? Can we become more efficient in how we produce our goods or deliver our services? What are things that we can do internally to become more efficient, speed up processes, reduce bottlenecks? Those are kind of the things we're looking at there. So an internal value chain is also on page 575. You can just see in terms of a product that we maybe are just designing. I start out with design at the top. I develop it, I produce it, I market the good, I distribute it, I provide service, right? I'm just continuously doing that with different product lines that I have. And then just also know, we've talked about step cost, and at the top of my head I don't remember what chapter that was, but a step cost, right? Basically every time I increased my ability to do something, my cost went up. So if I have a minimum order quantity from my supplier, or they say you can only order in batches of a certain number, you can kind of just see how that might relate. So this is the number of purchase orders and the cost of having those purchase orders. So once we move up from one range to the next, it doesn't go up in a linear fashion, it goes up more in a step cost faction, or a step cost factor. So that value chain, and the value chain, understanding the value chain, understanding relationships that we have, will allow us to exploit those. And by exploit, really meaning how can we use these to provide our goods and services at reduced cost and have a competitive advantage. So how can we be more efficient and more lower cost than our competition? And I should have mentioned too that some information about this slide right here is on page 577. Okay, so exploiting supplier linkages. The value chain system also includes value chain activities that are performed by suppliers and buyers. Exploiting external linkages means managing these linkages so that both the company and external parties receive an increase in benefit. Okay, so it's basically, how does everybody win? Think of it from that perspective, and as we become, or try to become, more efficient at what we're doing. So I'm guessing most of us are aware somewhat of a product life cycle. Not all product lines will last forever. Quite often when a company introduces a product, they know that it will only last for so long before some redesign has to happen, or some change, or the product will just end and we need to have something else ready in the pipeline to deliver to our customers. So just kind of be thinking of that's what a product life cycle is. And of course some products will have fairly long cycles and some are going to be fairly short. Just depends on kind of what space we're in with these products. So basically a product life cycle, the time when the product begins, we start to design it and develop it, to we abandon the product and move on to something else. The revenue producing life, basically that time period where we are receiving revenue for that good. And consumable life, length of time that a product serves the needs of a customer. So obviously technology would last longer than food products, obviously, right? So a vehicle would last a long time versus some technology. So it's just a matter of what space we're in that drives the length of some of these things. So from the marketing perspective, and I'm certainly no marketing whiz, I'll be the first one to admit that. And the life cycle stuff, I should also mention, begins on page 583. So some of the marketing stuff kind of begins towards the bottom of 583, just so you know what page we're looking at here. And this terminology here is on page 584. So the marketing viewpoint is basically that life pattern, and there's different life cycle stages that a product goes through, and they show a pretty good graph on page 584 too. So the introduction stage, right, we're pre-production, startup, obtaining a foothold in the market, saying here's our product, we're trying to get that market space. Growth is when sales are going up quickly, people are adopting the product, it's going well. Maturity is when sales start to slow. And then decline is basically when we lose market space and we lose market acceptance and sales begin to decline, right? So how long that takes, of course, will be dependent on what product line we're in. It'll be short for some, long for others. And here's a picture of that. That's the same graph on 584. So looking at it from the production viewpoint, define stages of the life cycle by changes in the type of activities performed, right? So right away we're doing R&D. As we do R&D, we come across a technology or an idea or an innovation that we believe can be turned into a marketable product or service that we can then sell, package, and sell to our customers. Okay, so we get to that point. Now we start to produce. We're ramping up. You can see the various stages are on the next graph here. It's on page 585. And so let me just show you what those are. So research and development, the planning, design, testing. Now we start to produce, and I've got the logistics of delivering the goods and servicing the goods and so on. So the consumable life cycle viewpoint, they begin to talk about that on the bottom of, let's see, I'm not seeing it exactly, towards the bottom of 585 and then towards 586. Activities in 4 stages: purchasing, operating, maintaining, and disposal. Okay. Obviously, with a product, we're trying to say, at this price point, here's what you're going to expect, right? Here is what the features are, the performance of this product is, and typically we know that if we've got options when we go to buy something, generally, if you're looking at tablet computers and you're looking at 3 to 4 of them, you know that usually the most expensive one is going to have more bells and whistles than the cheapest one. The most expensive one might have more memory, a better camera, more RAM, more whatever. It might just be a little bit bigger. Versus the lower priced one, which maybe is, kind of just has the basic features. So we kind of all know that, right? That's what we expect as consumers. So interactive viewpoint, life cycle cost management. So just think, okay, we're trying to manage the cost of the various stages of our product. So actions taken that cause a product to be designed, developed, produced, marketed, all those different stages. Producers must understand and capitalize on the relationships among the life cycle viewpoints. Once those relationships are understood, take actions to implement and take advantage of revenue enhancements and cost reduction opportunities. So in other words, where can we find opportunities to reduce cost at these different stages, and where can we find opportunities to potentially enhance revenue by adding features, new designs, new options, whatever it is. Quite often when you go out to buy something, you've got options, right? We looked at tablet computers. My wife wanted Samsung. We went to a store that had 3 models of a Samsung tablet computer. All would have met her needs. We looked at kind of a basic, a medium, and an advanced, and we made our choice based on what her perception was of what she needed, what she wanted to do, how long we perceived this tablet to be useful and operational. But the company offered options, right? And so They offered those options knowing that one model probably wouldn't be enough to capture all the market that they wanted, that if I offer 3 models or whatever they truly do offer, there just happen to be 3 at the store, I might be able to catch a few more people who are willing to buy these, right? Sometimes if something is too low cost, now we struggle with, well, will this thing work? Is it going to just die in a year? Or should I spend more money on something a little more expensive? And the assumption is it'll last longer. Now, that's not always true, but that's generally the perception a lot of consumers have. And this is really hard to see on your screen, I understand. It's on the bottom of page 586. Basically, that relationship between life cycles and where we're at on the growth stage. So, attributes of sales. Sales are low at introduction, rapid growth, maturity, then decline. You got product life cycles, all those different things right here. So just wanted you to be aware of that. So life cycle cost management, the role of target costing, useful tool for establishing cost goals. We're kind of moving on to something else here. I should mention that. So we're moving on to, and some of the terms I want you to read on your own is just take a look at page 587. They talk a little bit more about revenue enhancement and cost reduction. Obviously, a company should be doing both at the same time, right? What are some bells and whistles or features we can add, charge a little bit more for to maybe increase revenue? And of course, the cost reduction side is what are some things that I can do specifically to reduce the cost of me producing my goods? I give some examples in there too. So target costing starts from the bottom of page 589. A little bit different approach here where we're saying we want to manufacture a good, and we know that consumers are only willing to pay a certain price for that good. Okay, so let's just say whatever that good is, we'll use a tablet computer as an example again. Let's just say we want to sell maybe a low-end tablet computer, and we just say we know that based on our market research and what's going on in the market now, and our maybe putting together some focus groups of some potential customers, we know that for the features we want to offer in our tablet computer, we know that our customers are willing to spend $200 on that. So we figure out if we can sell this for about $199, that's where customers will buy it. If it's more than that, customers may not be willing to pay for it. If it's less than that, we might not be able to make any money off of it. So it's a target cost. You're basically saying, we know that to sell this product in the space we want to be in, we have to sell it at a certain price. Okay, above that, we're going to struggle for sales. Below that, maybe consumers will just perceive it as being of poor quality and not buy it, whatever it is. So once I've got my sales price figured out, now I have to come in with my production and make it for less than that, leaving me the profit margin I want on a per unit basis. So that's really what target costing is. So if I want my profit to be $50 per unit, I better make my product at $150, right? Or maybe it's that it has to even be less than that, because when the consumer gets that tablet at the retail store, they're willing to pay $200 for it, but my suppliers are not going to pay $200 to buy it from me, right? They're going to maybe buy it from me at $175, $180, whatever they want their markup to be when they go and sell it to their customers. So I've got to mark it down enough that there's profit for me as a manufacturer, there's profit for my retailers who are buying it from me and selling it to my customers. So once we've got that target costing figured out, I know what the price is, and I go backwards to figure out what my cost should be. There's 3 ways to do that: reverse engineering, value analysis, and process improvement. So this kind of gives you that target costing picture here, and this is on the bottom of page 590, and you can kind of just see how that works out. You start at the top here and you go, what's my target price? And I'm looking at my market share. I'm doing some research here, figuring out what kind of functions will this product need to have, what's the customer looking for, and that's my target price. So I don't just pick that out of the thin air, right? I need to have some real strong data to help me figure out what that target price should be. Once I've got that figured out, I need some profit, right? Whatever I want my profit margin to be. And so that gets me to my product cost. So the next question is, can I manufacture the product at that cost? If the answer is yes, then let's go ahead and do it. If the answer is no, I'm probably not going to do this, because why would I manufacture something that does not achieve my target profit, right? I'll spend my time elsewhere. So as a part of that, then just-in-time manufacturing and purchasing is a great way for manufacturers to reduce costs and achieve efficiencies. And I'm guessing most of us are aware that it's come up in the classroom a few times, so people have been bringing it up quite a bit. Basically, it says the objective is to eliminate waste by producing a product only when it's needed. Okay, so if we receive an order from our supplier, so if I'm this company making tablet computers and I get an order from, let's say, just Best Buy, okay, saying that they want 10,000 of these models to sell, I don't have the parts on hand, right? I don't have any of the raw materials on hand when I receive the order from Best Buy. So with just-in-time, I get the order, but I've been working closely with all of my suppliers, so if I say to them on a moment's notice, I need the parts to build 10,000 of these tablet computers, get them to me now, right? That's really what just-in-time is. So I only make a product when I need it, therefore I don't have to have money invested in raw materials or finished products just sitting there waiting to find a customer. Assumes that all costs other than direct materials are driven by time and space drivers, and we're compressing time and space. We're trying to become more efficient by not having to have this stockpile of raw material or finished good, and we are going to, so that's part of the efficiency of the space. And the time is, I'll work very closely with my suppliers to say, if I send you an order, I expect these goods within a certain time period. Whatever we've negotiated with our suppliers to say, if I send you the order, I expect to receive this quantity of raw materials and parts within a certain time period. So it says relies on the exploitation of a customer linkage as production is tied to customer demand, right? So we're not just making goods hoping to find a customer. We're making goods as customers demand them. So that's the difference. Supplier linkage is obviously extremely vital because I have to work very closely with my suppliers to say, I need the goods right as I'm going to begin to produce them. So that will also affect the way our factory is set up. And so a lot of this information, just FYI, is on pages 592, 593. The plant layout info begins in the bottom of 593, and they show us some pictures on 594, so be aware of that too. So a just-in-time manufacturer really doesn't have the traditional factory line, the production line that Ford developed way back in the early 1900s. So a little bit different. Okay, so instead they have what they call manufacturing cells, and each cell is responsible for every piece of the production process. Okay, so executional cost drivers for a just-in-time setting is a cell structure. The cells increase ability of the organization to execute successfully. The cells contain basically everything needed in a semicircle, and that's kind of the picture that you see when you look at it, which is right here. And it might show up better in the book, but it's on 594. Okay, so we're abandoning the production line where we organizing costs by department. So here I've got costs by Department 1, Department 2, Department 3. And I've got my production, different products going down a line and coming up with finished goods, right? That's one way to do it. Instead, we're saying, let's just have cells. Cell A just makes product A, cell B just makes product B, but they do everything to manufacture product A. This cell does the lathing, the grinding, the welding. Same with this cell for product B. It's a little bit different layout. And so, of course, that means that grouping of employees will be different. Each cell is viewed as a mini factory. Okay, Each cell requires easy and quick access to support. Centralized services are scaled down, and production personnel are reassigned to work directly with manufacturing cells. So I'm coming back to the picture. A neighbor of mine worked at a company that switched from traditional, and he was a manager there, down to this the cell layout. And he said that it reduced employee turnover because instead of doing the same thing over and over again every day, which can be very monotonous, basically in a cell structure, all employees were expected to know how to do every piece of the manufacturing. So every person had to know the lathing, the grinding, and the welding, or whatever the steps were. And so everybody's cross-trained. Everybody could do all steps in that cell. So you could, switch around. You could do what you wanted. The employees had more input and more say and more latitude in this cell format than the simple production line. Which leads to, I got ahead of myself, employee empowerment, right? Increasing the degree of participation increases productivity and efficiencies. Okay, so that's part of why just-in-time works better. Now, total quality control, bottom of 595, is where they begin to talk about that. That's just that commitment to quality, right? Where you never stop trying to become more efficient. You never stop trying to produce higher amounts of quality. Even in service companies I've been at, we still focus on quality. I've worked at companies where we try to measure the amount of rework. Rework could just be, still processes in a service firm, but rework could be lots of things. A production run of some data not working, having to do things multiple times because of some input error or data error that happened along the way. So that commitment to quality is to say, what can we do to eliminate waste, reduce the odds of something bad happening, the odds of rework happening, anything you think of that leads to poor quality. You're just trying to continuously improve what we're doing. So just some examples between just-in-time and traditional. I'll let you read through that on your own. I think it becomes fairly self-evident as you begin to look through that. Now, one big thing that's different between traditional and the JIT environment is in the JIT environment, the nice thing about it is that a lot of our overhead, I shouldn't say a lot, but some overhead items that had to be allocated in traditional can become more direct tracing in just-in-time because of the cell structure that we have. And so it's easier to trace overhead, for example, in terms of like supervision or custodial services, things like that. You can basically say, I've got a supervisor for a cell, and so I can directly trace that supervisor's cost to that cell, and that cell just worked on one product line. And so that allows me to be a little bit better at my product costing and not have to rely on as many allocations as I have to rely on in traditional. And that's what they kind of talked about there. So just that we have more direct traceability in just-in-time than we do in traditional. So of course that means that my product cost should be a little bit more accurate then, right? So obviously the more direct traceability I have, that directly impacts what I would perceive as the accuracy of my product cost on a unit level basis. The fewer allocations we have or need, the better when it comes to figuring out the cost of my true product cost. Okay, and so it talks here. We didn't spend a whole lot of time about process costing in this class, and that was by design. But it says implementing GIT in a job order costing system, we have to separate repetitive stuff from unique orders. So obviously we might have to make maybe we have some product that is more of a commodity based and we just have to make a certain amount of that per year knowing that customers will buy it. So we have to kind of separate that from maybe what unique orders are, for example. I'm going to skip the backflush costing for the most part, just on a very high level. Just know that if we use backflush costing, it is more accurate. It's a little bit more simplified approach when it comes to computing cost of goods sold and stuff like that. So it really can only really be implemented easily with a JIT system, but just be aware of it. There's nothing number crunching. I'm going to have you deal with it. So we just have what they call these trigger points that now prompt manufacturing costs to be incurred. Those trigger points will result in journal entries. But just be aware of it. There's nothing number crunching I'm going to make you do with it. So that was chapter 11. Hopefully a little bit different approach than some of the other chapters in terms of it's more concept-based than the number crunching that we've been doing quite a bit of. There's still numbers to crunch. We never really truly get away from those. But as you review the chapter, just be aware of the key terms, bottom of page 602, top of page 603. I should also point out with those key terms, if you go to the my.usf, our class there, click on bookmarks. In week 1, a bookmark in week 1 is the textbook website, and you can click on that. And what you can do when you click on this, pick a chapter, and when you pick a chapter, there's some good information there about terminology. So you can get to a screen that just shows all the terminology and the definitions in one screen. So when you look at it in the book, you go, okay, here's all these terms and the page numbers, which means I got to go flip back and find it, which is good. That's that's okay to do that. But if you use the textbook website, you can get to a screen that just says, here's the terms and the definition on one screen without having to go to each page and looking them up. So that you might find that useful. And then make sure you go through the discussion questions. Again, those answers are posted in handouts, and those discussion questions start on page 605. So in the classroom, I go through several of these, not all of them, but several of these. So on your own, I would just suggest that you read through those, kind of do some mental notes about what the answers are, or just jot down some of the key points from each question, then go back and check your answer, and they'll kind of give you a self-test in terms of, am I in the right direction here? Do I understand this, or do I not understand it? And of course, if you understand it, good. If you don't understand that concept, then just go back and find it in the chapter and just read it again. Just read that page or two that covers that topic. And the cornerstones begin on page 606. There's not as many as other chapters, thankfully. Some chapters have a lot, but go through and work on those cornerstones. And that should get you ready for the exercises. But I think you'll find the homework for this chapter isn't as detailed or daunting as some other chapters have been. So that's what I'm hoping you'll find, because this chapter is more about the strategy and more the qualitative than the quantitative. Okay, so if you have questions about it, as always, just let me know. Thanks.